What's up, Digilog fam? Welcome to the LZK Lessons Learned. We are kicking off season 2, episode 24, with a good friend of mine. Before I introduce her, I just want to send good energy to you guys, making sure y'all stay safe and creative at home. Thank you for all the support. Make sure to like, comment, subscribe to all our content. But without further ado, I want to introduce my friend, my Filipina sister, Mika. What up?
What up? How are you?
Ha- Happy New Year.
Happy New Year. I'm so
Eh,
excited.
we
2021. This is
we
it.
here.
We're
We're
here. We
here.
made it. We made it.
New
That's all
years,
that
new
matters.
gears.
Yes. Yes. I'm down.
I love that. More importantly, how are you and the family? How's everyone doing?
Amazing. Amazing. They've been safe. They've been, celebrating,
Mhm.
doing their Filipino thing, singing karaoke. So we good. We good.
Yeah,
Eating
just
good.
for context for the audience, Filipinos love karaoke and they love line dancing.
Yes. So, we had it was smaller than usual, but we got it done. My nephew made sure we were all dancing. Wrong song though.
Oh,
He was dancing to WAP, which I don't think he realized what
hmm.
that meant.
Yeah.
But
These are also lessons learned. Um,
it is.
these are these are L's you need to apply,
Yes.
not just for life but for the family.
Exactly.
Um, what not to when to dance to WAP and when not to.
Yeah.
Not a family event.
Not at all. Not at all.
um, but more importantly for context, obviously not only are you like a Filipino sister, but you were one of the especially when we first started the Digitalog. I remember we had done an event with Riser. Riser spoke, and we had done an event at WeWork, and then we had connected. He's like, yo, Riser was like, hey, I have this friend Mika, she's really dope, and she's like also Filipina. And I was like, word, let's connect. And then we've been friends ever since. Which is really cool. I say that very wholeheartedly because, you know, um, you do meet people in the music industry that you can call acquaintances, but I like to say you are one of my friends in the industry, and in the community as well. So I appreciate you. And yeah, we've maintained a really great relationship. You've spoke at one of our events, um, I think in 2018, and then most recently you did one of our Digital After Dark events.
Mhm.
um, and yeah, now we're here, the L's podcast. So for just the audience, let's go. Why don't you just give some context to like what you do on a day to day, and
Mhm.
then we'll go into like more of your background in a moment.
All right, cool. So currently, right now, I am a music programmer and at VEVO. So a lot of people, if they don't know what music programming is, it's basically me looking at videos and then putting them into a playlist that makes sense. I focus mostly on hip hop, R&B, reggae, dancehall, Afro beats, and soca. So those are my genres. And then I also work on a lot of podcasts. Like currently, I'm helping out producing two podcasts right now. There's one called Chopping It Up with Conduit, and the other one is The Mix Show. So watch out for those. So I'm gonna plug that in.
Yes.
Yeah. So it'll be interesting. They're going into season 2. So you know, getting to do two different types of jobs in the industry, still being creative is really really dope. So excited. I'm excited.
Yeah, yeah, I'm excited to really share your story, and I think this is a common thread along with a lot of music creators where we do have a day job in music, and we do make the time to also to pursue our other passions. So we'll make sure to put those two podcasts and their links in our description. So make sure to support those podcasts as well. So for those that are new, the L's aren't necessarily about losses, but lessons learned. I think more often than not, we it's easy to talk about the W's and the wins, but this segment of this podcast is really to share like how people got started, and more importantly, how they got to where they are today. And I think every person that I've interviewed so far has so many interesting stories that they're so relatable, and that's really the point of this podcast is to say like, hey, you can experience this as well. It's just that your journey was just going to be different and unique to you. So for you, let's just start at the genesis. Like, what's growing up, like, Filipino American and listening to music. What was that like? And what was that first project or artist that you just like that drew you to music?
Um, so my parents were really into like the disco era. You know, they came from the Philippines. They were very immersed in
Disco.
disco. You know, they were so into. They love to dance. You know, so it was
Mm,
is that even my aunts and stuff. They were going to Studio 54. So you know they were always dancing and all that. But I think what really got me was when my dad gave me a Bob Marley album. I don't remember
mm,
which album it was. I remember what it looked like, but he like it changed my world. Like Bob Marley was something that really connected to me, and I don't. It was just like a thing. Like I listened to that album over on my little tape deck, and I played it over and over and over again. So that was like kind of the beginning of me really finding something that I was interested in. And then of course my sister, I think she influenced me too. She's like 7 years older than me, and she was really into like. she, sorry, I have to laugh. She was like a Guidette, so she had like big hair, all that stuff, and she listened
yeah,
to that. I don't even like what is it called? The what is that type of music? It's not EDM. It's more.
was it
Mm,
like trance music?
it's not trance. It's freestyle. If you
Okay.
So freestyle was more. I don't really know, like if they really exist anymore. Like there was a bunch of artists that apparently people still love to this day. Um, and then she got into hip hop, which was kind of like my little
Mm,
gateway into it. And I always tell a story about how like everyone's like, oh, what was the first album you ever bought? And it was actually for my
mhm,
sister, and it was Black Sheep. And I remember I saved up all my money to buy her this album, and then it was one of the first ones that had the parental like um whatever it was. Like,
advisory.
yeah, and it was right there, and like I had to have my dad like stand next to me, and my dad was like, I don't know what that means. Are you allowed? Are you allowed? And I was like, I'm allowed. Just stand here. And I was like, they're just gonna give them the money. You just have to be here to make sure I could get it. He's like, I don't. Okay, okay, I'm going to stand here. And so he did, and I got it. And so that whole era of the like, I don't even know when that was. Like probably the early '90s of like really
Hmm.
getting into that hip hop, like hip hop scene. So it was the start. It was the start.
Dope, dope. So you talked about Bob Marley. You talked about your parents, loving disco, and you talked about your sister into this freestyle type of music, whether it was EDM or dance. But her introducing you to Black Sheep was kind of your introduction to hip hop.
Yeah, that was like my first like little push into hip hop, and I was like, oh, I like this. I was like, I don't, hmm. And then I started listening to the radio, obviously. So like,
Hmm.
Hot 97 was the shit. That was where
Hmm.
you got your stuff from, and I was like, okay. And that's when I started hearing like Onyx and Wu Tang and
Mm.
these art like Biggie, Tupac, like all of them on the radio, and it was just like, what is this? Like, oh my god, I freaked
Yeah.
out. It was good. It was really good, and growing up, I think in the '90s, you get that it wasn't only just hip hop. It was everything. Even the rock music was fucking
Hmm.
phenomenal. Like, Nirvana was coming out then, and like, all the fucking Rage and 9 Inch Nails and Tool. Like, I got into all of it. Like, I was like, oh my god, the immersion of all this music, and it was such a. I would say it was a golden age. I know people will fight me on that, but you know what? Golden age was the '90s
I
for me.
mean, I agree with you 100%.
That's I don't know. The older OGs,
Hmm.
they tend to differ. They say the '80s.
Hmm.
But yeah, I don't know. I don't know about all that.
Yeah, I mean, obviously the '90s was a huge era for music. So, you're listening to the radio, you're listening to like Biggie, Tupac. So your sister obviously is introducing to hip hop. Do you remember that first like show, or was there like a local artist that you went to? Like, what was that experience like? Did you go with your sister?
Well, I wasn't allowed to go to anything. My parents were actually really strict. So, me going to
X.
yeah, like so me going to concerts were scary for them. But really oddly enough, my first concert was Chemical Brothers.
Really? Hey, you gotta start somewhere.
That was really odd. Like everyone's like, "Wait, what?" And I was like, "Yeah, I." My friend got tickets. It was her birthday. So we
Mhm.
had her mom was dropping us off, and we were like, "Yeah, Chemical Brothers." We didn't really know exactly what we were getting into, and then
Right.
we're like, "Oh, this is different. Everyone's doing drugs." Like I was like, "What?" So innocent at the time, and I was like, "I didn't get it," and I was like, "But this energy is amazing." And I was like, "I want to go to more things that are similar to this, and I want to have that feeling of that music, like just in me. Like I felt like it was just inside me, and that's where I started really understanding like that love and the way that music could really move you. And
Mhm.
I didn't understand it until I went to a live show. And even though it was Chemical Brothers and it was insane and it was odd as fuck, it
Right.
made me feel something. I was like, wow, this is something I need to do more. I need to do this more.
Mhm.
So, as I got older, I did go to more shows, but um, they were they they started getting really independent. So
Yeah.
yeah, so it got a little like my you would think I would go to like all these like big like Onyx, Wu Tang. No, I didn't go to any of those. I started going into the
Mhm.
independent route, which was a little later in my life.
Gotcha. Yeah, I think it's important to note that because even for me, I think for a lot of folks probably could relate to this. And obviously, you mentioned it, like that. It's one thing to be a fan of music and obviously listen to music on your headphones and in the car, but to share that experience with like thousands of people
Oh yeah,
live, and it's euphoric. It's like you're just like, what? Like, whoa, my soul just went out of my body.
exactly. And you never fucking realize. It's amazing. It's one
Mhm.
of those things that you just really like. It's yeah, it's euphoric, most definitely, and something like I don't know. I could say it's like a spiritual moment, like
Yeah.
be there and be like, whoa, and like just everything from the lights to the stage, like everything that is involved in it is it's an experience.
Yeah, no, 100%. So, as you're going through your adolescence and you're going to high school or in college, like where was music in your life? And where did it start to formulate, and where did you start to take it more seriously, given your interest in music? Like, did it happen early in your high school or college years? Like, what were those kind of what was that transition?
So in high school, I was kind of like, I don't know what to do with my life. I don't know what I really wanted. Like, you think about like, especially growing up as Filipino, your main focus is probably like, your parents are pushing you to do things like be a nurse or be a
Yes.
dentist, like things like that that
Yes.
just weren't really something that I was personally interested in. And I was really struggling with like what made me happy. And I was like, well, I know that if I go to college, I want to study something that will be interesting. And at first, I was like, well, I wanted to really do movies. I wanted to like
Mm.
be a movie critic. I was like,
Okay.
I want to critique movies. I was like, oh, so I wanted to, I was watching a lot of movies, different types, like,
Mhm.
trying to understand the film industry. And then when I started looking at colleges and I was like, oh, I was like, yeah, I'll go into broadcasting. That sounds cool. And I was like, wait, I want to go into radio. I was like, you know what I really love? I love I love fucking listening to music. And so I was like, well, radio person, yeah, I could do this. I could fucking do this. And so I went into college being a broadcasting communications major in specifying in radio. And so I learned the ins and outs of how to, do radio. And that was when I kind of started doing like the radio show for my college. So I started off with the first one,
Mm.
and that was like underground hip hop, like New York underground hip hop. And then my other show was all indie rock. So like
I like the duality of that.
right, it was completely different. One was at like 12 in the morning, which was the hip hop one, and then 2 in the afternoon was like my rock one. And I was like, okay, I
Mhm.
got both of these. I'm doing that. Did voiceovers for all of the commercials that were like on the radio, like for the show, for our network or whatever. And it was dope. It was like, it was something that I really, really loved. And I was like, wow, I wonder if I could really do this in like New York. Cause, upstate New York, you can do a lot of stuff up there. There's no restrictions. It's not too hard to get into the scene there. But
Right.
being in New York City, I don't know. I thought that was gonna be a completely different monster, which it was. It was. It was a completely different. So yeah.
Yeah, I can only imagine. And I feel like the reason why I think this is important to note, like some of a lot of people's first music experiences are either in high school or in college. And I love the fact that you're able to like, participate at your college radio station. And for a lot of young folks that are listening, they got to take advantage of these resources that, when they're first starting out, like kind of look at not necessarily what's in the industry, but more so what's available at your school,
Hmm.
like, and really supporting those local, programs, whether it's a local college station or a music program, because I think those are a lot easier to get access to than just getting an internship at a bigger company first.
Oh yeah, most definitely. And like the fact that you get to learn everything, like working a board and like getting all this stuff, like it is important, And that
Mhm.
was where I really learned how to work everything and like learning how to do audio files and all that stuff. So it was such a stepping stone because it gave me like a notch up before everybody else that was coming in, just like, hey, I just love music. What do I do? So it was cool. It was really cool, actually.
So you talked about, obviously learning the ropes within your college, radio station, and you talked about like really underground hip hop, and then you talked about rock. But how did you, spotlight some of those artists that you were, tapping into? Because there's this underground hip hop scene that you're building your name in, and you're featuring their music. Like, did you go to shows during the week? How did you feature them, or did you do interviews?
So, well, since I was all the way upstate, it was kind of hard to get anybody or go to like shows. Like we would go to Syracuse. Like Syracuse
Hmm.
was the closest to get anywhere, and I believe I feel like it was like one of the I don't know, it was either like Murs or Cannibal Ox. It was one of those artists that came to like Syracuse, and I went to one of their shows, and like, it. I didn't really know how to do anything back then, so I was like mad nervous, and I was like, I mean, yeah,
Yeah.
like I'm just a fan.
I'm press. Let me in.
Yeah, and I was just like, yay, and so I don't think I found my voice yet as much as like I was
Mm,
out there and I was really like talk. I was nervous. I was really nervous, and that was something I had to learn as I continued working or as I started in the industry. But I
mhm,
knew that like I was focusing a lot on one particular label, which was Def Jux, and Def Jux was from New York. It was
mhm.
started by LP and another person. Um, and LP now is Run the Jewels. No one really remembers that he had no one. Not a lot of people know that he had a label before that. But the label was
I didn't know that.
one of the best underground hip hop labels I've had. Like I was really listening to that was in New York. So it was like them, Rhyme Sayers, and then there's like other ones, but like New York, it was Def Jux, and so they had
Hmm.
Merce, they had C Ray's Walls, they had LP, they had Cannibal Ox, they had like all these really really dope artists, at least to me, because I never heard anything like that, especially during that time. So it was like what, maybe at this point early 2000s, and that was when like
Right.
Mace was coming out with, and like all the shimmying and the like bling and all this stuff, and I was like, I don't really understand this. Like I don't
Hmm.
understand this world. And I was like, I'm not really connecting to hip hop on that level. And that's when I
Mm.
started really learning more about the underground world. And I was really lucky to have friends that were like DJs, and they were like, here, you gotta listen to this. So like, the mixtapes that came out, I was like on it, just listening. And so I was like, well, who the fuck is this? And who the fuck is that? And as I learned, I was like, oh, so I'm really like into this label. And I learned everything about their artist and everything. And that's how I just started like promoting it. And I was like, okay, and that really was like kind of where I was going with everything. But
Hmm.
yeah, it was an interesting. It was really interesting, and that kind of, I guess, pushed me into like my internship, and that was how I started like really growing into where I am now.
Yeah, I think it's super important to note that just because it's one thing just to have a job, right, to work at a radio station, but it's another thing to immerse yourself in the culture,
Yeah,
right?
yeah,
Because you can't really speak to things if you don't participate in those things, whether to your point, listening to new artists that your friends or DJs are recommending and
mhm,
really diving deep into that specific subgenre of hip hop. And that's why I always tell folks like it's not just like, hey, like music isn't just the idea of having a job,
mhm.
but understanding that it starts from the love of music first.
Oh yeah,
And I think that says a lot about you because it just came naturally because you wanted to learn about you know the underground hip hop scene and also put those artists on, you
uh-huh.
know,
Yeah, because
which is
yeah, no one has ever like, I was upstate New York, like no one has heard of any of those artists. So there was like, what are you talking about? Who are they? And they're like, what is that
right.
sound? But it's that boom bap sound that, comes along with like New York. That's a very New York sound, I would say. So
Yeah, yeah, definitely. And then you also mentioned earlier like about finding your voice and kind of developing that and your confidence. So what was that process like? Like you get this internship in music. How do you like through on your experiences, like what are some of the lessons where like, all right, I know I love music. I know that I'm doing this in regards to like the underground hip hop scene, but like how did you start to develop your voice within that scene and really find your place in it?
I mean, it took me a little while. I think, you know, being an Asian woman in
Hmm.
underground hip hop, like
Yeah.
it, that's a rare find. That's something that, I mean, even to this day, when I meet someone, another woman that's Asian that's into that, I mean, I don't. They're very rare. They're very rare. And it's something that I didn't see. So when I was interning, most of the time I was one of the only women, like only women that were there. So
Hmm.
finding my voice was hard because I was constantly like being shut down by all these
Mm.
men, and I'm like, and so I was a little bit nervous to like start giving ideas out and really like saying what it was that I thought could better um whatever process that they were doing. And it really like I can't even say, like, it was really like finding other people. Like, I saw Miss Info, and she was,
Mm.
one of the only Asians that I knew that were really in hip hop. And like, she was on like, so for me, like, she was what, like, that was what I wanted. That was my goal. And I was like, well, she has a voice and she could do it. Now, how do I, like, how did she do it? Like, I didn't have access to her at the time or anything, so I was like, oh my god.
Right.
But I knew it was possible, and because I had someone that, like, I thought, hey, I might as well just say something, and like see what happens. And if they don't like it, then okay, next, let's keep going. And like I got shot down many fucking times, like people were not listening to me, people were not respecting me, and I was
Hmm.
given crazy advice like, oh, if you want to be in this industry, you either got to be a hoe or you got to be a bitch. And I was like, I am
Mm.
neither one, neither one.
Right.
And I
Right.
think that was like, wow, this is. And I was like, you know what? I don't want to be either one. And I was like, and I'm not going to. And I was like, you know what? I'm gonna
Right.
figure this out on my own. And it took a while. It took a while. So not until I think I reached like getting a corporate job was when I started like really seeing women in charge, like women of color in charge too. So it was like, huh? And
Mm.
like hearing their stories, and I'm like, wow, like y'all could really do, like we could do this, like you're directors. So it gave me this confidence that like, yeah, I can say whatever the fuck I want because I'm smart and I'm like all those people didn't want to listen because I didn't have that confidence in myself. And that was really what it was learning how to be confident in my own like knowledge of what is happening. So it, it was that was definitely a lesson that's still ongoing.
Yeah. Yeah. No, I wanted you to point that out just because, I think is one very challenging. Hip hop and particularly music is male dominated for years, and I think particularly you entering a very niche kind of market within hip hop and being not only just a woman but also an Asian American woman. um you know there's a lot of like obviously challenges there, but I love the fact that you talked about Miss Info, and that's also says a lot about the importance of representation,
Yeah.
where people like us and in these positions are
Mhm.
very important in terms of like really telling young folks that we do look alike and that you do have an opportunity to do these things.
Mhm.
um and that's so super important just because for both of our journeys, we didn't want to be a nurse or a dentist.
Yeah.
And I think that's why representation is so important,
Oh yeah.
um in the industry, especially when there aren't many Asian Americans in music.
Yeah. No, definitely. And I think, especially like when I did your panel, the first one was like Asians in music, and I was like,
Hmm.
what? And to even have like a panel like that, just to see, like, I wish I had something like that when I was, you know, getting into the music industry where I could have met people like us, and be like, oh my God, like you exist, and maybe there wasn't. I mean, maybe there wasn't us. There maybe there was only a couple of people that were in it, but we just were never.
Right.
We're never the focus. Like even if you're doing like in the music industry, the people that are doing the back work aren't usually the ones that everyone gets to know. So like it is really important to showcase people like other races that could be part of anything. You could be part of anything. You just need to realize that there are people out there. There are people out there for sure.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And I think that that's what makes music so incredible, that it is you know very diverse. So I love seeing it. There's a lot of progress that's been made, but more progress to be made. So I'll leave it at that. So for you, you talked about just kind of navigating these spaces. I think it's important to also just kind of recognize like, finding your early champions or like mentors. Did you kind of lean on anyone, or and did you find those folks that helped champion you despite some of the challenges that you came across?
Sadly, I didn't really have anybody. Like there were
Mm,
a lot of people that were like, "Yo, you should just leave." Like the amount of times I came home from, working and I was like, damn, I really, I'm fucked up. And like, my boss is kind of sexist and racist
hmm.
at the same time. Like, there wasn't really anyone that I could talk to that could understand. And like, obviously you go to family and the one
Hmm.
thing oh, well, we told you should be a nurse. And it was like,
Hmm.
that's not helping me. And, they're like, oh,
Hmm.
well, you can make 10 times more money doing the same thing if you worked for, whatever company this was. And, and those opportunities are like, hey, we'll offer you this if you want to come work for this, whatever job it was. but it wasn't
Right.
what I wanted, you know? So I really had to learn how to like like put myself like pick myself up and like really tap into like my like what I could do. And like if this is what I really want, then I need to really show people what I can do. And that's where, you know, I started going hard. And that's when I started getting
Mm.
like three jobs, sometimes four jobs I'd be working. Four jobs just to make ends meet, and then also to be part of like, you know, to network. Like that was the biggest thing. I was like, well, I need to know people in order to make anything happen. So where can I find it? And I'll say it was really random. Like I used to work for the Village Voice, and for those
Mm.
that aren't in New York, Village Voice is, you know, a iconic newspaper, and you know, no longer exists in paper form, but I think it still exists online. But they were, you know, one of the first people to really give me a chance in like the street team element of things. And like, you know, they really, and it was women that I was working for, you know, and it was just really for that for me. I kind of leaned on them a little bit to ask for like advice, because you know they've been around, they were doing stuff, and I was like, all right, maybe not so much music, but they were still in that like entertainment type of world. So I was like, okay, let me
Right.
take some advice from them, and you know, and then of course it was from there. It was just like a lot of other job opportunities like that, like Power 105. I did the same thing, and
Hmm.
that's when I started you know, meeting more people that were women that were really like encouraging. So it took a while. It was like me really trying to find my place and then finding people that would help me. So it was like I couldn't just go somewhere and be like, hey, I found someone that really supports what I do. No, most of the time, if I went to a job, it was like, oh, they want to support you, but you got to go on a date, or you got to, you know, and it was a lot of like uncomfortable situations where it was just like, you know what, I'm not going to do that, because I feel like this is not how I want to get into the industry. So, you know,
Right.
it was a weird way of like, you know, navigating through other
Hmm.
places to get to where I really wanted to be. So it was weird. It was my journey was a very odd one, and not so much like everyone else's.
Yeah. Well, I think that's what makes this whole series so special because, I think these are the stories I want to spotlight, right? Because people see you programming a Vivo, but they don't know that, you had to like go through multiple jobs where you were undervalued or you're just underappreciated. And then you also spoke about just not having a mentor at the time. And those that happens, right? Where you don't, you look around and you don't see people that are, one, look like you, or two, don't want to champion you.
Mm-hmm.
um the fact that you were able to really just believe in yourself, and I always stress this, is like, be your biggest champion. um and find opportunities where you said, oh, I'm going to go super hard. I'm going to get 3 to 4 opportunities, whether it's working at the Village Voice or working at Power 105. And and you also spoke about building relationships and getting your name out there. We're like, hey, Mika's a cool person. Like, you see her at these parties and these shows. And I think that's always been like the like the through line with music, like that relationship that you build with people through live shows and these events. They're like, wow, you're really immersed in the culture. Like, it's kind of a way of validating, like, hey, I know what I'm talking about. you know
I don't think
I'm
people,
out here.
yeah, like people don't realize, like when people are like, oh, you're always out, and it's like, no, I'm out not because like obviously like yeah, I do love going out, but it's also for that like yeah, I need to meet more people. Like I want to understand this culture, and that was really how I started. Like when I was interning and I was really trying to get my way, like I was like, what? I need to learn more about this. Like, yeah, I know about underground hip hop, but what is it about this culture that I don't understand? And that's when, like, you know, I started working at the Village Voice, and then you know I started working at Power 105, and then I was also working at Fat Beats, which you know obviously is one of the other
Hmm.
iconic like you know underground hip hop like stores and all this stuff. And you know, I was lucky enough to meet like so many people that were part of Fat Beats that have become so much more than just old coworkers or whatever. Like they became family, and we were all trying to make it. So it wasn't like we're all at certain level. No, we were all at the bottom. We're all at the bottom. We're all at the same playing field at this
In the
point.
trenches.
Yeah, we were like, okay, so how do we all win? How is this going to happen? And and I think being part of that and having like all these people that love the music, like the customers that came in, like I could
Mhm.
say one of them is one of my best friends. You know what I'm saying? Like just really like finding that that family. And like people say that Fat Beats was elitist, and it was to an extent because it was a different culture. It was this music that not a lot of people understood and not a lot of people listened to. And to be part of it and to be immersed in it, and like to go to these shows and like see like an Action Bronson before Action Bronson is what he is now, or like seeing these artists that just were nothing, like they were coming up, and like to be there and be like, oh my god, I knew this person was gonna blow up, like
Yeah.
that's amazing. Like even like my love for Doom, that happened all because,
Mm.
I was part of this culture. Like Stone's Throw was another, major label that I wanted, well, indie label that I really wanted to be part of, and, unfortunately they were in California, but, it was all these people's music that really inspired me and really made me feel something. And like I wanted to learn more about them and why and this and that and like how everything like worked. So me working all these random ass jobs really helped me learn more about the space that I wanted to be in and what I really wanted to focus on and what I really was interested in, So it all like made me into this thing.
Yeah, no, it's super important to know that because I think a lot of folks when they first start out, they kind of pigeonhole themselves to like, oh, I want to be an A&R,
Mhm.
and this is the only thing I want to know. But I think it's important to understand in your own experience that the ecosystem of music, they all play a part. They all work together in some facet.
Mhm.
You may love the idea of being an A&R, but it's important to understand these different spaces so you know how things work, and not to like kind of pigeonhole yourself or cap yourself in terms of like what you want to learn, because it doesn't help you in the long run, right? Because I think in your own experience, you were able to like work these various jobs that allowed you to realize what you really want to focus on,
Yep.
and that comes with actually doing it,
Yeah. And
actually go and doing those internships, you
mhm.
know,
Putting
um,
in that work.
and yeah, you have to know how it works. And I think the other thing I wanted to point out too is the fact that you talked about that group of people at Fat Beats and how important it is as you're going through this journey to like really find your tribe.
Mhm.
Those folks that you know you said that are at similar levels to you, but you build as you come up.
Mhm.
And whether it's that customer or like the people that work there,
Mhm.
you can say like 5 to like 10 years later, these are people that you can call your friends, but you're all doing it now
Yep.
and you want to build together.
Exactly.
So
No, it's a beautiful thing. Like people are like, oh, Fat Beats, no one knows about it, blah blah blah. But like it really, like now, the amount of people that I see out are the people that I've met at Fat Beats. Like those were the people that I spoke to. They're like, and everyone's like, oh my god, like this is crazy that we're at a different level in our lives, and like we all really like we stuck to it regardless of anything that we were going through. Like we stuck through it, and it was important to us. And like you know because of that, like I have this love of helping independent artists. Like that's so it really has helped me as a programmer like really look into artists that I've nobody really listens to, and showcasing them, because that's kind of like my love. My passion is to really help like these artists that I believe in, because I've seen the growth, I've seen what could happen if they just had the right people behind them. So
yeah, no, I love that you're pointing that out. And I think that started, even way back to, we spoke about, right? just to kind of like before we kind of fast forward to what you do now, you
Mhm.
know, I like to always rewind how things got started. So, you're obviously your parents love the disco, um, you know, you know, you kind of came in, obviously, listening to Bob Marley, it kind of being like a turning point for you. But I think you mentioned that it was your sister that really drew you with Black Sheep because you were with your dad online, uh, convincing him that this was okay to buy it. So kind of fast forward, you talked about your adolescence where you were at the peak of the like golden era, right? We talked about this is debatable, but the 90s,
Yeah.
listening to radio like Hot 97, Biggie, Tupac,
Mhm.
now obviously just music in general, like Nirvana. So your interest in music was very high, and I think you also mentioned about you know going into college, what you wanted to do, and you talked about just kind of like at one point being a movie critic, but that pivoted into you obviously going into broadcasting and
Mhm.
specifically within the music and radio space. um, and then during that time in college, upstate New York, you were able to like really learn the ropes of running that radio station from programming music for underground hip hop artists to the independent artists, the indie rock scene, which is cool because you got to see both worlds, and also spotlight them. It
Mhm.
wasn't necessarily the most popular genres, but I think that's super important to note that you were able to like really champion that music.
Mhm.
um, During this time. Obviously, you're still figuring out your kind of like your voice, and I love the fact that like during this transition, whether it was your first internship or your first job, it was even though you had these initial challenges, one being a woman and also Asian American,
Yeah.
that you found like different inspirational points or like within misinfo or
Mhm.
just other women that you were seeing, but you didn't necessarily have that mentor in the beginning. But I think I wanted to point out that through your journey as you develop more internships and found these opportunities, that you actually went out and sought for it,
Yeah.
like versus having to wait for it to come to you.
Mhm.
So I wanted to point that out. And then going forward towards like the Fat Beats opportunity, and I think your love for underground hip hop and finding your tribe was probably a really key inflection point for you,
Yeah.
just because like you've done all this. I like to say you've gone through the MBA of music. Like you've gone to all these shows. You're working at The Voice. You're working in Power 105. You're at Fat Beats. They see you at all these shows, and your parents or your friends don't understand why you're going, but you're immersed in the culture, and it's a sense of validation to say like, hey, I not only know this music, but I belong here.
Yeah.
And I wanted to state that because, like, I want to kind of recap on these things, and this is something I typically do, just because it's you've come a long way to get that point, and now fast forward, now you're programming music and also programming podcasts. So, at Vivo. So,
Mhm.
I just wanted to sum that up and say that it's super important to recognize these stories, and I love that. And then for you, like, what out of everything that we spoke about, what was probably like what's one big um, lesson learned, based off like your journey and the things that you've gone through.
To believe in yourself. I think that was the biggest one, to find your voice and like really believe in what you want to do. I think, you know, if you want to get into music, I think that's gonna be like it is one of the hardest industries to get into. And you're gonna break. You're gonna break. You're gonna reach your point. But if this is something that you love and people are around you don't understand it, like believe in yourself. Like you could do what you want. Like you just have to put the work to it. Like it's not gonna come to you like on your doorstep. It's not gonna be something that someone's gonna find like, oh, I had a really interesting conversation with you. All right, here you go. Here's a job. Like no, it doesn't happen to everyone. Like yes, those are rare moments where it does happen to like very specific people, but you gotta work your ass off and like that was it. Like believe in yourself and find that voice.
Yeah, these are great lessons learned. Believe in yourself, be your biggest champion, and eventually find your voice. And always, I think to your point earlier, like kind of go back to the roots of why you do music is because you love music, and making sure that you always kind of come back to that. Um, but Mika, I appreciate your time. I know we were talking for a minute. For the audience, we're wrapping up the LZK Lessons Learned. Make sure to follow Mika. We're going to have her socials in the description. Also, we're going to have links to her podcast that she's working on as well. Make sure to follow those podcasts and support them. Make sure to like, comment, and subscribe because we need that engagement.
Yeah.
But more importantly, shout out to you for locking in episode 24 for season 2 of the LZK Lessons Learned. Appreciate you, Mika. Shout out to the Digital community. We're gonna have more dope episodes of these incredible music creatives coming soon. So make sure to follow us. So I'll talk to you in a bit. Peace out.